Good evening, everybody. Here we are, night 4. Hope y'all are doing well. And page 4. When God becomes revealed, we experience pleasure beyond measure. This perfect spiritual pleasure is what we were created to experience. All the other pleasures in the world that are not pleasures of divine experience are called in the Holy Zohar Nehira Dekik, meaning a very tiny spark of pleasure. So pretty powerful statement, which is basically saying we were created, human beings were created in order to experience pleasure beyond measure, which is the revelation of God, right? When God becomes revealed, we experience pleasure beyond measure. This perfect spiritual pleasure is what we were created to experience. So, what does it mean when God becomes revealed? Have any of you had an experience of the revelation of God revealing God's self to you? So my personal experience in this domain is when we experience the magic of existence, when we burn through all the layers of ideas and names and labels that we place upon material reality, and we feel and experience the core, ourselves included, not separate from that core, and we experience the unity within all of existence and all of creation. That is, to me, the revelation of God. And that pleasure is a pleasure beyond measure because it clarifies everything. It gives one the aspakla me'iria, which means the clear lens that they said that Moses had, ispaklaria me'ira. And it means you see. You see. Right now we walk around in so much darkness, right? And so much confusion. So darkness is confusion, light is clarity. And the revelation of God or God's light is the clarity of purpose, the clarity of being, the clarity of understanding why we are here. So all of the pleasure that we get otherwise, physical pleasure, intellectual pleasure, etc., is considered a tiny, tiny spark of pleasure in relation to the revelation of God. So we'll go on even in the next phrases to understand more about pleasure and about receiving and giving, which is central to the Ashlag teaching. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. Next paragraph. The machine we call a human being needs the fuel of pleasure to live. The machine we call a human being needs the fuel of pleasure to live. Until we are able to experience real pleasure, the pleasure above, we are sustained by small pleasures of our physical world. Until we are able to experience real pleasure, we are sustained by the small pleasures of our physical world. We need to be mindful not to be drawn after the deception of these most minimal pleasures given to sustain humanity, as it is easy to bury ourselves in these pleasures instead of being becoming able to experience the real pleasure. It is easy to bury ourselves in these pleasures instead of becoming able to experience the real pleasure, right? So all of the pleasures that we know of in this world, we have to be mindful not to be drawn after them, because if we are only drawn after those pleasures, then it makes us unable to experience the real pleasure, because we're not even seeking it. We don't even have a desire to go after the real pleasure of union with Spirit, or the revelation of God. So this teaching is cautioning us not to get wrapped up, consumed with the physical pleasures, the emotional or intellectual pleasures of this world, and to maintain our focus on the perfect spiritual pleasure, the pleasure beyond measure, that is God's revelation. The concept of spirituality requiring effort is not what it seems on the surface. To receive reward in equal measure to the effort. This is not plausible, as the effort is temporary and the reward is eternal. The concept of spirituality requiring effort is that the Creator wants us to acquire the nature of desiring to give. Right? So we talked about desiring to receive, desiring to give. All of creation is inherent in it, the desire to receive. Everything, every object, even inanimate objects, have a desire to receive. In the Ashlag teachings, they say like a rock has a desire to stay a rock, to not be disintegrated or destroyed. It wants to stay together. The atoms bond together. They want to stay moving and bonded together. So there's a desire to receive in that. And as creation becomes more and more complex, the desire to receive thus becomes more complex. So inanimate objects, they want to stay solid. As you move on to plants, plants want to grow. They want to reach towards the sun. They want water and sunlight and nutrients from soil. Animals, their desire to receive is even stronger. They want to procreate. They want to eat food. And, the more complex animals want to have connection, love, belonging to the pack, the group. And human beings, their desire to receive is the most complex, with the sense of self and the ego and the identity, which can want to be known, be worshipped, be loved, to be famous, and all of the different intellectual, spiritual, physical pursuits, emotional pursuits that we have. Those are all expressions of our complex desire to receive. And this work, the whole spiritual work of the Ashlag Kabbalah, is to acquire a desire to give, right? So the concept of spirituality requiring effort is not what it seems on the surface. What is it on the surface? That to receive reward in equal measure to effort. I'm not sure exactly where this concept comes from. This has probably connected with something that came before it. But this is not plausible, as the effort is temporary and the reward is eternal, right? So it can't be. He's basically saying it can't be that the reward is in equal measure to the effort, because the effort is always going to be temporary, and the reward, which is the revelation of God's light, is eternal. So the concept of spirituality requiring effort, what does it mean? It means that the Creator wants us to acquire, meaning to effort, to put forth the effort to acquire a nature of desiring to give. If you have questions, write them in. Okay, 2 more little blurbs. The pleasure of giving that comes from a heart that truly loves is an eternal pleasure. This is the complete opposite of self-serving pleasures, which are never fulfilling. So just take that in for a moment. The pleasures of giving, the pleasure of giving that comes from a heart that truly loves, the pleasure of giving that comes from a heart that truly loves is an eternal pleasure. This is the complete opposite of self-serving pleasures, which are never fulfilling. So if you know anything about pleasure, if you know anything about desire, you know that when you desire an ice cream and you eat an ice cream, you might be fulfilled for a moment, but what happens when you're done with one bite or one cone? You generally want more, right? Unless you ate so much that now you're sick and you just don't want anything because you're so bloated. But once that feeling goes away, you want more, right? So it's never fulfilling. If you have sex, if you have sexual pleasure, it's great, and then it ends and you want more. We're always in this cycle of wanting, desiring pleasure, it ending, and then wanting more. And we're stuck in that loop. But the pleasure of giving that comes from a heart that truly loves is an eternal pleasure. So what does that mean, the pleasure of giving that comes from a heart that truly loves, right? So a heart that truly loves. A heart that truly loves is a heart that is already bound with spirit. A heart that already is in some way connected with the revelation of God. So when a person has that heart that truly loves, then the giving is actually an eternal pleasure, because that giving is already bound in this other framework of reality where I experience myself and everything else and everyone else as an expression, as an extension of the divine revelation. And my giving feels like I'm giving to God, right? If I love you, if my heart is loving towards you, because I feel that you are an expression, an extension of God, and my giving to you is with that love in my heart, then that is giving to God. And that is this eternal pleasure, actually, because it's all bound in this revelation and actualization of God's unity. Does that make sense? Please let me know if that makes sense or if you have questions about that. Okay, last little blurb, page number 5. We're often unable to clarify for ourselves if we are giving or receiving. Great divine help is needed to see our true motivations clearly. Okay? Simple 2 sentences. We are often unable to clarify for ourselves if we are giving or receiving, right? So many times when we give, on the surface it appears like we're giving, right? But really underneath that, there's a desire to receive. So if I give to a certain person, underneath that could be a desire to receive accolades or appreciation or acknowledgement that I have given this person something, or in the future, the economy of love, expecting something in return. So I'm giving in order to receive. That's one of the 4 stages of giving and receiving, which I'll briefly state now. There's receiving to receive, the most base level. There is giving in order to receive, which I just described, when I give something but with the intention of receiving something in return. There's giving in order to give, which is one of the highest levels, which is true giving. And then there's receiving in order to give, which is a very, very complex topic I'm not going to get into now, but later on in the teachings we'll probably touch upon it. So we're often unable to clarify for ourselves if we are giving or receiving. We don't actually know, or it can be complicated and it can be tricky within our mind and our psychology whether or not we're actually giving or receiving. Great divine help is needed. Really, actually, great divine help is needed to see our true motivations clearly, right? We can be fooling ourselves when we're giving. We can totally be thinking that we're giving altruistically or unconditionally, but it's only with great divine help, with great divine insight, that we're actually able to see our true motivations clearly. Okay, I hope you enjoy the teachings for tonight. Leave a note and be blessed.